Hello again, and welcome to the next episode of Outcomes. I'm your host, Barrett King, which I hope you know by now. With me today is Tristan. He's actually part of the partnerships team at Recruity. We've known each other for a little while, and we've had some interesting conversations around acquiring partners and thinking about certainly a good fit. So we're going to talk about that today. First off, though, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to our chat. I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody to kick off, super important, and that is, what does partnerships mean to you?
Partnerships means to me, I would say, an opportunity to grow. So I think personally and professionally as well, and from a business point, I think partnerships is just being able to grow in a role that's new in the industry, to transform yourself from something that, you may have not worked in before, but you can reinvent yourself in partnerships, and obviously growth in the business sense as well. So I think that's what sort of springs to mind first when I think of what does partnerships mean to me.
Cool. So let's talk about what you do there. Let's talk about what the business is to lay the sort of groundwork for our conversation today around good fit partners and how you're acquiring them. So what is Recruity? What do you all do there for the listeners?
Yeah. So Recruity is a applicant tracking system. So for those that are not familiar with the recruitment technology space, it's your HubSpot, your CSM, your sales tool. It's that, but for recruitment. I think any company that's doing recruitment in any professional way is using some type of ATS. Recruity is one of those, and Recruity is actually part of a wider group of HR tools called Talent. But Recruity specifically is an applicant tracking system.
Okay. And so when you think about partners then, how do you even frame that out? I don't know. I mean, I know what an ATS is. I've been in sales leadership and partner leadership. So I've done recruiting. I've used platforms like, Greenhouse and otherwise. What specifically about your platform is partnerable? We'll make that word up today. How can you actually work with partners to deliver value with the platform?
Yeah, definitely. So from the initial partner profile, I would say you're looking at a lot of consultancies, agencies, recruitment specialists who really are about going into businesses and transforming the operations, the processes, but bringing in tools. And one of the tools that you have to have if you don't have one is an ATS. So actually it brings a lot of value to partners to be able to bring along with them a technology they can implement, solves a lot of their problems, helps them improve their recruitment, which is their overall goal as an agency and as a partner. So that would be the initial draw, is just to bring a great tool to a client and solve some recruitment problems. As we mature as a partner program, there come services as well. So being able to deliver actual onboarding, implementation of a tool, more specific services around the tool. But initially it's just, hey, if you're going to do any kind of recruitment, you need to professionalize it with a specific tool.
I find it fascinating when I talk to folks that are in partner positions like yourself and others. There seems to be this, maybe it's like a common denominator, if you will, that if you're implementing some sort of a software solution, which is obviously the premise of my show, Partnerships and SaaS, that 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, there's some sort of a person in a small business or a medium business that is also supporting that mechanism already in the market. And so when you thought about the early partner market fit in terms of identifying those types of consultants you're describing and the agencies that are actually working with your customer base, did you do so based off of past experience, or did you observe that customers you were already working with were engaged with other businesses? I'm always curious to ask that question around partner market fit.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually. So we initially, when the partner program was initially started, it was many years back before I started, but it actually started as a simple ambassador program. So starting off with just, hey, we have clients who might want to refer other clients, or set up a refer a friend type strategy, which is like Uber and everything that has a share your link and you'll get a discount code.
I hear that a lot. Yeah, that's common for what it's worth. That's interesting. Keep going, please.
And then we saw over time, it wasn't even being managed by anyone specifically, but we saw, hey, some people are sending more than one referral. What's going on here? And when we digged into it, we started to see that there were some companies that were recruitment businesses that were using the referral program as a thing. So we said, actually, well, let's build a different program. Let's keep the one for customers, but let's make the one for these types of people more sweet, more juicy, more actual
more attractive. Sure.
Yeah, more attractive, and then have someone manage it. And that's where the program started.
See, that's so interesting to me. That every conversation I have, I mean, I don't mean to put you in a box in that sense. It's not at all. You're very unique in that way. But every conversation I have with a partnership leader, they talk about this observation-based or opportunistic early stage of their program. How far down the line are you from that moment? Was that 6 weeks ago or is that 6 years ago? I'm curious in terms of like progression and sophistication now.
So I would say it's like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So after about a year or two of just having the program run itself, there was a point where we hired someone to actually manage the partner program. And from there, they hired an individuals for each region. And now we're actually a team of around 12 people.
Okay. And so in terms of difference, in the beginning, it was, right place, right time, perhaps, or just the observation like we were describing. So you were perhaps at that time allowing folks in just based off of proximity. They were closer to the customer, therefore they could join the program. Are you more selective now? How has that process changed?
Yeah, so we're definitely more selective in terms of we have what we now call the ambassador program, which is for clients, and entry requirements are just how you sign up, automated through the platform. But we have now the solution partner program, which is more specific. It's invite only. There's a different set of requirements. And yeah, from there, we even now over the last year started to select which of those solution partners fit into what we call proactive, active, reactive.
That's
based
smart.
on their like potential for more, more with us. So do they want to do co-marketing? Do they want to do trainings, workshops? And then we can even filter those solution partners into specific buckets too.
And what spurred that? So it sounds like there was a transition perhaps more recently around wanting to segment the partners themselves and be intentional. Does that have to do with the way that you're recruiting or the way that you're activating those partners?
It's management of the volume. So we now have I think 130 partners in the Benelux. In the DACH, it's like upwards of 200, and globally like upwards of 400. So, and that's solution partners, like that's actual agencies. So at a certain point, you just have to say, right, we can't manage everyone in the same way and give everyone priority. We're going to now say, right, these partners fit a specific profile within the program. We're going to give them more resources, attention, etc. And then the others, we still offer high level of services and support, but it's got to be done at scale.
What's interesting about that though is that is less common. There's a lot of leaders I talk to that are further down the line, for lack of a better term. They're bigger, right? They've got more partners and they're just starting to think about how do we segment. So cheers to you guys for going at that early and being intentional. I think that matters. As you go into that segmentation, you start to think about the differentiation between the partners' value they deliver to you, the value they deliver to the customer. How much of your early conversation, then let's talk about recruitment for a second, obviously, and the acquisition of partners. In that dynamic, in those first, call it 10 conversations, how much of it is setting the stage then for here's the ways we work with partners? And so whichever one of those paths you pick, we're going to allocate resources and the things you talked about in terms of actually giving them co-marketing and such. Does that take place early, or do you say like, let's get them in, we're going to give them perhaps some sort of a bridge. Let's give them a year or 2 years before they change and we bucket.
Yeah. So in the early conversations, we're open with partners that, hey, if our partners have high potential for like multiple referrals and they're open and willing to work together with us on initiatives, then, we will invest a lot into the partnership. Some partners are just like, hey, we don't have that many referrals per year. We don't have the capacity to do extra marketing. That's completely fine. So they kind of self-select how they want to interact with our partner program. We just base it on that. There's no difference in the reward they get for referrals or anything else really. So it's not like a tier program where, okay, you're a tier 1 partner. Every solution partner is the same, but it's more of a management style, internally. And for them to also be like, hey, don't reach out to us for co-marketing because we just haven't got the resources for it.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about it being a little bit of self-selection, but also more a reflection of where you and the team observe there to be more value versus less value is the wrong term, but less engagement perhaps. As you're segmenting those partners down and you're thinking about the intersection of value there, you're talking about resources, obviously. how much of this is based off of just size? Because to your point, actually, Tristan, like you're talking about these inflection points in partner growth and the ecosystem scale and size. And I think there is a very specific, I've seen this actually, a very specific moment that takes place when you get north of roughly 100 partners and you're still under 500, where you start to have this identity crisis in terms of like, it's like graduating high school. Like, do I go to college? Do I not? What do I do next? Do I go to university? Right. And I think in that moment, you have an opportunity for change. Is the team thinking about, in your experience so far, doing things like tiers, doing things like specific, even customer facing alignment in terms of, how those partners fit into the model, or you're going to keep it more fluid? How are you thinking about that?
So we have discussed like the tiering model because it can be super beneficial and motivating for partners to work in that way.
Yep.
So we have explored it and we're like dabbling with the idea. Right now it's more of a management style thing. So it's just purely for being able to focus, and it's definitely fluid. So what I noticed was partners that are put into the high proactive bucket of partners at the start of the year can like on a quarterly basis change as well, because their business something might shift in their business. So it's not like a very rigid thing, and other partners will come and say, hey, actually, I've got loads of opportunities this year and we want to work more closely together. They can go from being reactive to proactive quite quickly.
Sure.
So it's quite interesting to see. And that makes it quite challenging as well if you're going to dedicate things like budget or resources to a specific partner, that you have to take that into account.
Yeah, being mindful of it. So it's interesting. Let's go back to the beginning then of the conversation, specifically around identifying good fit, because we've talked a lot about partners that come in and then how they activate and how you then obviously resource allocate and such. Going perhaps top down for the listener, right? When you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about who are the partners that I want to work with, I should be clear. So are you actually yourself acquiring partners, or is somebody else doing that?
I'm acquiring partners.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. So the question is appropriate then. So as you acquire partners, and you're, again, in that example, you wake up in the morning and you're like, great, here's who I want to go figure out is the person that I want to pursue for the day. Do you have a rubric of criteria that you're using to identify them? So, or is it based off of size or type of services or region? What are some of the criteria you're using to identify good fit for the business?
Yeah. So the way I did it, so I'd say like 18 months ago when I first started recruiting partners, we had about like 25 active partners in the program. So
wow. Okay.
Quite small. We have quite a lot of inactive partners as well. So the first thing I did was coming into the business, and my goal was to grow the number of partners. That's what I was targeted on.
Yep. Total number, just to be clear, because your inactive comment's important actually. Do you know something like 80% of most partner programs are quote unquote inactive, depending on how you measure that. But in most partner programs, it's roughly 80% of the partners that are not active, 20% drives all your revenue. So how much of it is relative to that? Were you going in and trying to activate existing partners, or it was all about net new acquisition?
So there was about 50% that were inactive. So I'd say that was 50 partners in the program, 25 active. And then first thing I did was reach out to the inactive partners to try and reactivate them. Not really the best. It's the hardest thing to do because, they're inactive for a reason.
Sure.
So I spoke to a few of them, and a few said, they changed their focus in terms of their business model, or business had shut down, for instance, and a lot of them just never reacted, which just shows them why they're inactive, and that's completely fine. Moved away from that quickly and spoke to the partners that were active to figure out what was their motivations, did the research and just figured out, why they are doing well in the partner program. And it was really the happiness of the product. Like I mentioned earlier, they get results out of it by bringing it to their customers, and ultimately that reflects well on them as a service business. And then lastly, it was the commissions, and that was more for the very small independent partners, the freelancers, the interim recruiters. Then the commissions are interesting. So now I'm creating profiles for different types of partners. You have agencies, 25 employees to 50. You have interim as one person, and the motivations are different. So now I know how to target these people with messaging and communication. So that's really where I started, was with the research.
Yep. And then as you're researching, are you documenting all of this so that, we talked about building profiles, you talked about building positioning and whatnot. I'm a big firm believer, and forgive me for putting you on the spot here. If it's not the case, you can push back. But big firm believer in data, certainly, and thinking about not just looking at did my email get opened and such, but then what is the right messaging? And then if that lands, how do I do that at scale? And then thinking about once these partners have been acquired, how much of their first 30, 60, 90 are they active? Because we know 90 days in most partner programs, that first 90 is the most vital time in terms of proving ROI, proving value, getting a partner into the system. How much of the work that you're doing right now then around acquisition is that data-backed, sort of science-based work versus I hear from a lot of folks, so there's no right answer here to be clear.
Right.
At the other end of the spectrum, which is more art, right? So less science, a little bit more art in terms of using the feel of it, having conversations and being more fluid in terms of the way you're trying to acquire businesses.
Yeah. So I had the kind of luxury of coming from a sales background. So
sure,
I think that's one thing that the partner managers that come in maybe from a different background struggle with partner recruitment is to be data driven in their outreach systems, the ways that they operate. And for me, like, it was super important because I came into a frame of mind that, okay, I need to outreach en masse. I realized that about 70, 80% the people that responded, and it's the same with sales, respond after like the third, fourth outreach.
Yeah.
Partner managers who don't come into it from a sales background will probably give up after the first email or get sidetracked with the million other things they need to do. So I was very consistent. I created a flow or workflow using Kooker. You can use any project management tool. Create a list of target partners, create email templates, move them through a very rigid process, or outreaches, and then move on. Use automations like email automation tools, which you can schedule the follow-up automatically. Sure. So you're not even doing that yourself. Be careful with the automations, of course. You don't want to mess up names and stuff like that. But if you do it well, it can be super effective. And it worked really, really well for me. I was doing buckets of like 20, 30 potential partners at a time, moving them through this process. And I could then measure and see what was working. And you add a Calendly link there, your agenda just gets bucked up with introductions. Yeah.
That's great. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. In our last minute or two here that we have, I'm curious, any feedback in terms of pitfalls, right? So you're still fresh to this in terms of your perspective in the business. You're looking to acquire good fit partners. Sounds like you've had some good wins there. Anything, if we go kind of the negative here and say, there's some things that we didn't do well or mistakes that I made earlier, things you'd want to give in terms of feedback or guidance to the audience to perhaps avoid things they could do better by listening to you.
Yeah. So obviously, like with playing with automation tools, things can get a bit tricky. So like we're all strapped for time, and, it's important to be as efficient as possible, but you can also mess up a lot when you put automations in place. So be careful with how you use the tools. Like, do it in small segments at first before you start going, to market with this, going to town with it. Do it in small doses, check that it's working, get familiar with the tools that you're using, and then you can really start going at it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As somebody who receives quite a bit of automated outreach, I'm a big fan. I think there was a measure of attention to detail there and being very intentional that AI and automation and all these tools are meant to make us better, not replace us as sales folks and certainly partner folks. So +1 on everything you just said. It's been great, my friend. Great chatting with you. If folks want to get in touch, where do they find you? How do they reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Tristan de Kooker. Feel free to connect with me. I'm also in most of the partnership Slack channels, so you might find me there, so you can shoot me a message anytime.
Brilliant. Well, this has been a great conversation again. Thanks for joining the show. As always, folks, I appreciate you liking, subscribing, commenting. Feedback is always welcome. This has been Outcomes and another great episode. Cheers, my friend. Thanks.